Hey, Mr. Sweet, how you doing?
Hola, how are you today?
I can't complain. It's Sunday, and I wish that we did not know that there was so much flood that happened and flood that's going to happen. I honestly pray that we have a no we
Right.
have a Moses type thing to just get it all around your house, Sweet.
Yeah, I'll take that. I absolutely will take that. It's a little bit of crazy right now. Is that light? I just shut up the backlight there to help. That work a little bit?
You have beautiful bean footage. I think it's great.
Uh, well, not really beautiful, but more beautiful than before. All right, I can live with that. But we're working on the bean footage because everyone should have pretty beans.
That's right. So we talked about some misunderstandings about flood and
Yeah.
specifically looking at guidance from NFIP, FEMA, to get better guidance about
Right.
what they wanted, because Sweet, a lot of times we're pulling a bulletin from 2013
Yeah.
and we're applying it today as if that's the only course. I mean, like, they had a guy on one of the bulletins that I was looking at, and his email address doesn't exist anymore. He retired 9 years ago.
Right. But see, that's one of the dirty little. I don't want to say dirty little secrets, but all right. So how about this? People are frequently frustrated with FEMA and with NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, or SFIP. There's lots of things that are challenging because, in reality, as a pseudo governmental or governmental entity, there's no real recourse if they're wrong. What that means is you want to make it really easy for them to be right the first time. So you having your estimates in order. I have one client that just redid her kitchen. She has her kitchen estimate, she has her flooring estimate, she has her drywall estimate, she has her paint estimate, she has pictures of all of the trim, the floor trim, the door casing, pictures of the actual door, pictures of every threshold. And you know why she has those, right? Somebody helped her. But she has all of those things in place. She replaced her windows. She has the scopes for the windows. And for the last 2 or 3 days, she's been putting together back all of her sub bits. Now, she happened to have been lucky enough to have all this done recently. But when that adjuster, and this is one of the flood things, right? So when that adjuster walks on site, that adjuster is going to be able to put a good 90% of this to bed. So one of the wonderful things about NFIP is, and your adjuster will love you from NFIP, is if you can have real, actual, itemized estimates right up front when their feet touch the ground, and you can give it to them, you're going to fare so much better than letting everybody argue about over the next, I don't know, 3 to 6 months. Because the guy that you see will not be the guy that settles the claim. There'll be an inside desk adjuster that does that. If that goes to the inside desk adjuster, the chances of it being squared away are going to be so much better.
I have a particular question about this
Sure.
relative to where we are right this second. We have Milton on the way, and we had
Right.
Helene like last week, right? Well, theoretically, especially those people like on the barrier, like on the bay and on the barrier locations, they got flooding,
Right.
substantial flooding. A lot of those haven't been visited yet.
Nope. So here's what you
How do you
desperately need to
how do they
do.
mitigate that?
Yeah. So here's the thing. Chances are, if you're on the coast, you're going to have two separate losses. If you didn't wander around the inside of your house before Helene, and then the outside of your house and your roof all the way around, and get really, really good 4K video. Open up closets, open up drawers, open up cabinets, that kind of stuff. If you didn't do that already, you got to go out and do it this time. If it flooded last time, guys, go back in and do it again, because what's going to happen is there's going to be this argument over, well, the flood caused it. No, the wind caused it. No, the flood caused it. No, the wind caused it.
Or it was the last storm that caused it.
Right. Or the last storm.
It
Absolutely.
wasn't this storm.
Correct. And we're going to go through a kind of a really granular run. I imagine this is going to get cut up into a million little pieces because it's just too tedious to listen to. If you got to listen to me looking or watch me look at this and read stuff for you. But if you,
Everybody likes it when you're tedious, Sweet.
yeah, I know.
That's what they pay you
Yeah, I'm
for.
sure
Is
everyone's still about that.
you're tediousness. I had a client the other day said, "I think we're going to bring Sweet to this one. We need
Yep.
it." And he goes, "We need some tedious work here." He said that. He said that to me.
Ray did?
Yeah, he did.
Great. Well, guys, here's the deal. I'm gonna pop it out. Here's my official hot mess mug. What we're getting ready to have is we had a mess before. We're getting ready to have a hot mess now, and one of the ways you can prevent that hot mess is going through and videoing everything. Take stills of everything, highest quality your camera will do. And guys, go into your camera settings and turn on your date and time and GPS stamp before you take these pictures and do this video. It is so much easier for the adjuster if they see that imprinted on the picture, so they know exactly when it was taken. You cannot put the genie back in the bottle if you don't do this up front. Don't come back to me and say, oh, but I can't figure out, and they want to do this, and now everybody's arguing. All right, you can bake in an awful lot of pain relief up front if you'll do that.
And I think to some degree this respects the people that are adjusting the claims too.
Well, and it has to be.
You're making them problems.
You're going to get an hour and a half from these guys maybe. But if you already have every picture of every room in a panorama, and the walls and the floors and the ceilings, right? If you have everything that's unique about it so you can help them. If you can have all those pictures, put it down on a piece of paper, make it simple for them. All right? If you do that, when they go back to write those scopes, the chances of them getting not only accurate scopes, because remember, they're going to see 5 or 10 others that day. So the chances of you getting an accurate scope, and then a scope that has, I have 4-inch or 5-inch or 6-inch trim on my baseboards. My baseboards have 6-inch trim plus a cap plus shoe molding. So if I make it really easy for him to know that, chances are he's going to get it right the first time. Right. You can imagine how fatigued these people are, the pressure that's on them. It's oh God, guys, it's rough. It's really, really, really rough. So have patience with them and make it so easy for them if you can. Have your general contractor have your work authorization signed. All right? We'll go in this in a minute, but your contracts, have a copy of it for them so they know who's actually doing the work for you. If you're going to give them an estimate, make sure it's a detailed estimate. If you do not give them a detailed estimate, line item by line item, room by room, not lump sum, I promise you somebody will be breaking this apart and trying to argue over it. It's an absolute guarantee. So do that. They know it's suspicious. It may be even the right number, but it's still going to look suspicious simply because you're not giving them data. And that's what they're looking for. The good news, the bad news is they're quasi-governmental or governmental, and there's no recourse if stuff goes sideways. The good news is, and this is what we're going to be talking about today, they have a claim manual, and they will follow their claim manual. If you will make sure you do what's in the claim manual, chances are your outcome is going to be much, much better. Absolutely. I mean, by miles better. So you don't leave this to your contractor. This is your loss. I need you to listen to me again. This is your loss, your house. And in Florida, at least, it's your job to provide the documentation and prove the loss. So you sitting back and being relaxed about this, not documenting things, not having the things that we're going to talk about put in a nice, tidy little bundle, all written down, because if they're written down and given to the carrier becomes responsible for them, right? All right, you've not only been a good insured, but you have the benefit of, but I did tell you, and sorry for some reason you didn't like it, pay attention to it, want it, whatever, but it is what it is. So we're going to have to do what we got to do. So anyway, it helps with that a lot. Most of these guys are really decent folks. You just have to be decent back.
So, but from the contractor's perspective, how can they help this process as it comes?
So from the contractor's perspective, guys, if you haven't read, reread again, all the documents, the actual policy, go read the policy. It's really not that long. The mitigation section, I think, starts on page
78.
70. You want to start paying attention about 64, but they get to the real, because they're talking about estimates and how to build estimates. They get to the mitigation one somewhere 76, 77. All right. and then that runs for another 10, 12 pages. So, and we're going to go over all that today if we have time, assuming we do. But please read it. Please make it simple. Don't make your insured have to fight for stuff because you just don't want to do it.
Okay, so why won't I just read what the most recent bulletin is and just go with that?
Okay, so here's the way it works with bulletins. You're going to think that there's a more current bulletin than the bulletin everyone's using. And in general, they really actually aren't. They're still using a bulletin. They're using the underlying mitigation practices from a bulletin in 2013. Now, there is a June 2023 NFIP, God, what's the rest of the name? There's an actual policy, and there's a fresher bulletin out than that. But they're still referring back to that original thing, which doesn't make a lot of sense. This is not like drawing a real house, contractors, a real policy, in that the order that we do things in is different than you would normally do it in a house. Normally in a house, you would go in and you would stabilize before you do anything else to prevent further damages. National Flood Insurance Program is not like that. What they want you to do first is go in and save whatever contents you can and move all the contents out. Then they want you to make sure that you separate your labor for the contents that cannot be salvaged for your contents that can be salvaged. If you're going to work the contents that can be salvaged and need to be cleaned, you're going to need to have an actual sheet that links to pictures, and make sure you take all four sides and bottoms and tops of everything as you go, and you're going to have to do an actual inventory log, a real honest to God inventory log if you want them to cover it. Otherwise, you're just going to pick a fight and everyone's going to argue for forever and ever.
You do know that if they hate you at the carrier, they make you do contents.
I started off with contents when I was a kid. One of the first things, and I think that's the way they weed them out. It's like, you know,
It's like
organic chemistry and Chem 101 are kind of weed out classes for everyone who thinks they want to be a scientist. You think
Right.
you want to be an adjuster? We'll just sit you down and let you do some contents for a while. It's true.
I made it through the second course,
Yeah.
but then left promptly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's no fun. I'm a glutton for punishment. I made it through organic and everything else. I was going to be a doctor. But anyway, story from 100 years ago. So the contract, you need to know that. Once you have all of those contents processed, then they expect you to demo the entire house, muck the entire house, clean the entire house, decon antimicrobial the rest of the house, or the house. They want Category 1, Condition 1, which means they want you to document in your drawing plan. Yes, you're supposed to have a drawing plan, folks. They specifically asked for it. They want category and class. Now, they will tell you up front, believe it or not, there's a little section here that says that all floods are Category 3, Class 4. If you don't know where that is, you need to find that. You need to use that when you do your dehumidifier calculation. And alert, they want you to use the not detailed form, the basic simple form. I do see them accepting the detailed form if you produce it, but the one that they cite is not that one.
Okay, I have a question for you. To some degree, the standard flood policy is more specific than any other traditional policy when it comes to mitigation, correct?
Well, at least they will tell you what they'll pay. They tell you what they expect, and they'll tell you what to pay. So they want to have all that done before you put in any dehumidification. And they write in there that they think that if it's done properly, the structure will be dry in 3 days. But right after that, they say if it's going to be longer, you need to have documentation. Now, guys, we're going to go over the level of documentation we need, but it's your normal level of documentation that nobody does. Inside, and it's an exterior temp RH GPP. It's temp RH GPP by room, for every room.
By room?
Every room, every day. Moisture contents, EMC, for every room, for every day. Dehumidifiers, for every room, every day. And here's the one that nobody catches. The air conditioner. In and out for the air conditioner every single day. Now, I did see something's been passed around that said they didn't want any drying to commence until the HVAC is functional and operating. When I read the policy, I didn't see that.
But that's not that in many ways, that's not a functional way to be, because otherwise we'd have to be bringing in, and maybe that's the answer. Maybe we need to bring HVAC into our equation on mitigation.
You can, but then they don't want to pay for temporary power. So I think there may be a little bit of a, this isn't great for restoration contractors, but if your HVAC doesn't work, but your heater does, if you have emergency strips in your heater, 10 kW, 15, 20 kW strip, and you can turn that on and your air handler will still work, what you can do is you can turn it up to about 100 degrees and you can bake the house out.
And you also could burn your house. And you also could burn your house down because of all the wet electricity.
Okay, we don't do this until an electrician. We don't turn power on. Okay, so everybody, before that happens, and we kind of got a little bit out of order. Before you turn anything on in the house, an electrician needs to look at it. They need to write a bill. The bill needs to be detailed. They need to make an ohm check. And by the way, NEMA says that any water in a jacketed wire means it has to be replaced. I have no idea if they're doing it like that, but the problem is the water gets back up in there, grows mold on the paper in between your coated wires, your jacketed wires, and then the water runs up the jacketed wires, creates corrosion, and then eventually can create failure in that system. So anything that has any water in it like that. So if you have a 4-foot flood, you need to be reworking the house because that's all your switches and all of your outlets. The stuff up in the ceiling has a run back to a switch or an outlet typically, or to the panel. So don't forget about this, okay? And if you don't have that NEMA quote, contact me or contact David, and we have those kind of things. We use them routinely. We use them with fire as well. When you have a fire, the firemen spray down everything, right? Well, that water with all of the byproducts, the incomplete combustion, are very caustic, very corrosive. Even clean water, if you can find any of it in a flood loss. And by the way, this is what I'm going to tell everybody, guys. I know it's fun going out and wading in the creek. When I was a kid, my mom, when it rained, we had big old drainage swales. It was in Kissimmee. It was a little bit of yeehaw. So we would go out and I would swim in those drainage swales. And by the way, I came back with infections more often than not. You cannot imagine how monumentally contaminated that water can be. It has every contaminant for anything that's ever touched the ground, anything that composed, all the insecticides, all the herbicides, all the chemistry that drops on streets from cars, all right?
Fecal matter.
All the fecal matter from the dogs and the cats, and everybody lives outside. Gravity works real well. Generally, the poop winds on the ground. Well, it comes through that, not to mention the sewers that back up. And then you have no idea what other kind of contaminants are coming from leaks, mold. There's people still on oil, buried oil. I have buried propane. People have buried oil tanks. There's all kinds of stuff. And the bottom line is you just don't know. It is, you're probably more likely to get hurt in a way that is immediately visible because of your contact with flood water or anything else, which is why you need to be very careful with your PPE, and you don't need to be doing it if you don't have it.
The bay by where I live, they have a flesh-eating bacteria.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff.
If you had a flood, it's something they talk about here. Yeah. If you have a flood, understand that you might have the flesh-eating bacteria in your house.
So if you're a person, hold on for just a second. If you're a person that wants to do work on your house, you need to have basically waterproof boots, like fireman boots, muck out boots. You should be. Yes, I know it's hot. There's all kinds of contaminants that get on you. You should have on at least, a lightweight painter suit. You want something that's going to shed that water off so your body and your skin can absorb it, right? And then you need eye protection because stuff splashes. And then you need nitrile gloves with regular work gloves over them. And you need 70% isopropyl alcohol so that you can decontaminate yourself without water around. and you need to put on anything. If you have cuts, you need to stop immediately. You need to go take care of them. You need to cover them back up. You need to have on a respirator. Guys, there's a lot of mold, a lot of microbial stuff. Don't get an N95. An N95 is not a respirator. Go get a half-face respirator and get it with, they make filters that either have HEPA or ones that have HEPA and organic vapor on them. They're black and magenta. Black and magenta, they're not yellow. I'm not thinking of that. Yellow?
The yellow
Black and
ones are like,
magenta.
the yellow ones are for the other kind of like
For
like
acids.
plywood and stuff.
So black and that way, when you're in there and things start to dry, that mold is actually growing. At some point, the mold thinks, and bacterial stuff thinks, it's going to lose its competitive edge. So it will sporulate, and it gives off volatile organic compounds that have all kinds of cancer-causing stuff in it. Will it? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. The problem is you don't notice for quite a while. And if you happen to be a really lucky person that doesn't have is it MTHFR? I think gene, MTHFR, I always get it wrong, but it's a gene that won't allow you don't have an enzyme that will take and break down mycotoxins. So they just correlate in your body. A lot of these people that have problems with mold in their house, and everybody's like, it's clean, it's clean, it's clean. And they're like, no, I'm sick, I'm sick, I'm sick. Most of them are not hypochondriacs. Most of them have that particular gene. Or they built up a sensitivity to it, and their body just can't handle even small loads of it. So this is where you become sensitized. There's a reason that contractors get paid what contractors get paid to do this controlled deconstruction, all right, under hazardous conditions. It's not hazardous if you walk through it as much as it is hazard if you constantly work in it. Their exposure is so much broader, so much longer, so much bigger that it might not be an issue for you, although you should still protect yourself. Protect yourself.
Well,
All
yeah,
right.
and I would say, and look, I would say, Sweet, that the younger, I'm quite young still.
Mm-hmm.
The younger version of me
Mm-hmm.
just walked and spent lots of time around mold, around toxicity, and the version I have today has a hypersensitivity to it, and I have to get away from it. It tells me it's toxic. Get away now.
Well, that's kind of the least of the worries. At least your body can process it. A lot of them just can't. There's people who run around with cancer because of exposures like this. All right, they just can't.
Well, that's
does that make any sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, and you can't link it one exposure to the other. It's like asbestosis or silicosis. It takes a while for it to deteriorate your body. A lot of those organic alcohols, the volatile organic chemicals we talk about, not only are they carcinogenic, but they're endocrine disruptors too. So they screw up your hormone levels. They screw up your body's ability to communicate neurologically. There's lots of research on it, and nobody hears about it. Because you can't connect the 2 points.
Wait. Are you saying if you drink alcohol, it's bad for you?
I think it's ethyl alcohol that we're discussing here at the moment. It is ethyl, right? Not methyl, because methyl's wood and that kills you.
Okay, but you took the classes. I didn't. I'm just asking.
I believe it's ethyl alcohol, if I recall. Yeah, you do poison yourself. Alcohol, the side effect and euphoria, everything is actually kind of technically poisoning. Sorry. If you imbibe, you should at least know.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was, gosh, we're going to have to go all the way back to where this was, the good and bad things about NFIP. NFIP is predictable. They publish something in an actual manual, and they'll generally go by it. Bad part about it is if they don't want to go by it, it's very difficult to get them there, to get them off of that point and to get anything taken care of. There's ways to do it. It's actually in the policy. If you'll read it, there's ways to upload these things, just like there's ways to get professionals on a job. I probably won't get to it today, but if you're going to hire somebody to come and do building loss, their policy says it has to be a professional engineer. That's a PE. Now, I don't know that I would necessarily agree with that because I've had them accept me before, and I do not have a PE designation. I just have 40 years and every other designation on the planet. But you need to be aware that they may not take it if it doesn't have a PE. So you would want to ask them. And there are certain things, by the way, this is a little star moment. You need to star this. All right. There's several things that may require an expert to be brought on. And one of them is to actually find where the moisture went in the walls, interior and exterior.
Do you think,
which is good.
yeah, do you think it's advisable for like a contractor to say, write an estimate and then like F9 note or whatever, say, as per standard flood policy, such and such page, such and such paragraph, any of that? Do you think
Sure.
it would you think that would be wise to get, because usually I don't say, like, we don't, as contractors, we don't quote policy.
So who am I, Kamala? What are you throwing me these softball pitches? Look at you.
I'm not.
You got to make it hard on me.
Pitches. I'm asking you, should you do that? Because we don't do it. We don't do it in a normal wind claim. They tell us we were trying to adjust the claim.
I don't have a problem putting it in if you're not trying to push on it for coverage. If I put it in, I would put it in with some language and verbiage that said, in an effort to comply with NFIP policies, practices, I've done this based upon this. So the problem is when you start trying to tell them there's coverage for something. If you're trying to clarify what you did and how you did it, as long as you're really careful with your wording, and this may be where I make you raise your right hand and say you'll talk to your attorney about this first before you do it. So it may need to be that.
But what I could say is that this report that we've given you
Right.
is as per such and such page of this policy.
Well, I will tell you what it will help you with.
And this was as per this. It makes it, to me, it would make it, because, okay, I'm going to tell you a little secret. Do you know who I talked most to last week?
No,
I talked to independent adjusters who hadn't adjusted a flood claim in 12 years.
Right. So that's the biggest thing you could do to help the adjuster. Because if your contractor's writing it correctly, then that helps the adjuster know that it should be done that way. And you can be a tremendous help if they'll take the time to read it. And that's part of the problem, is a lot of times they just will not read it. And that's where your site inspection with the adjuster is very helpful. If you can have even an interim scope that have those details in it, so he takes that. Guys, there's no problem at all with doing your first 6 days. If it takes 6 days to get there, 7 days, do it and then put a watermark across the back of it. Print it and then put it into a PDF generator, a PDF program, and then watermark it with, for this date to this date only, on every page as a part of the transparency. All right, turn your opacity down to like 10-15% so you can see it. That way there can be no confusion that this is just for this date to this date. It is not inclusive of everything that was done. It's an initial estimate only for a advance. And then you don't get yourself caught.
And you can, and that's another thing about the standard flood policy, is you can actually ask for an advance and get it.
You absolutely can, and there's a couple of things. Was it at $5,000 and $20,000? You can ask for both of those things. But guys, if your contractor is got their duckies more in a row, you can get a heck of a lot more than that. There's no reason, knowing exactly how they'll write this, that you can't be really, really accurate 7 or 8 days in. You should be able to do that. You really, really should. Now, there may be a bunch of stuff that isn't covered, and if you're going to do that, if you know there's stuff that the insurance policy is, or the flood policy is just not going to cover, please put it in and then mark it to come out as a subtotal part of your Xactimate item, your estimate. That way the insured knows the difference. They know what the total is going to be, and you can subtotal that out. When you run your reports at the end, you can run your subtotal out. And if you don't know how to do that in Xactimate, you can look that up. There's tons of stuff on YouTube that kind of lets you do that and identify that.
Incidentally, I would just say, by the by, once we have this storm that we're going to try to help avoid your house.
Yes.
Sweet.
We're going to pray.
We are.
Yeah, the Indian people.
I think it's possible that they move the Indian mounds closer to you, so it'll may just move around you.
No, the first one leveled it. The first answers did that, and now all of a sudden It is only operating at 20% of its former juju.
Yeah, and evidently, there's one behind this one too, by the way.
I know. And this is odd. I do not ever remember a storm approaching like this. I
Yes,
really don't.
I don't either. I just think that from a contractor perspective, number one, from a PA perspective, if you could write this estimate lockstep inside this policy, especially during the early days of all of this, you win.
Hey, look, if you can get an adjuster to realize that you just did all of his heavy lifting for him, give him the ESX file, guys. If you're not trading ESX files, trade him an ESX file. Clean and sanitize the file if you need to. Go through, export it, take out all the information, send him everything over so that it doesn't have any of the actual data in it anymore, so it's clean for him on an import or her. You can pull it back in. You can get the sketch. You can get all the line items. You can get all the rooms.
Why can't you just send them your ESX?
Sometimes they have very particular things that they don't want. Some of them do not want an ESX from a contractor. Some of them, it just turns off something or sets off something in exact analysis. But if they've used it like a template, say to import it like a template.
Yeah,
so you can help them like that. So it isn't. And yeah, is this silly? Yes, it's silly.
does NFIP doesn't have its own database, does it? No, not in the exact work. No.
I don't think so. No. Which is another thing, guys. Make sure you get the right zip code, but then do bear in mind, contractors, that they do say that those numbers that are produced are often not correct, and that you're supposed to change them. Guys, the way you change that is you go into your supporting events. You go into your change for your supporting events and allow more time in, more time out. You increase your travel time. You set up your takedown time. Guys, make your work rest ratios heavier. If they're in there, they're in 90 degrees inside of a house with the sun beating down on it. It's going to be 110, 115 degrees in the house. Those guys should be probably on 25 work, 75 rest. Unless, of course, you're letting them wander around without any PPE. Tell them that. Keep track of your time. Explain to them that this is what's necessary to protect your people. You should be doing that regardless of whether or not you get paid back for it, because we don't use up our people like that. We are a better industry than that. And if you do that, I think you should be sued for it. If you're out there letting your people harm themselves, you should know better. And if OSHA catches you, just don't think that OSHA has changed their rules because it's in the middle of a storm. IICRC hasn't changed their rules. EPA hasn't changed their rules. Ain't nobody changed nothing.
All
right.
Don't you like it? Don't you like? I love sometimes to show contractors go look at the OSHA database,
right,
and see who's been fined for what.
Yep.
And how they look and realize it's all the things they're doing, and like somebody paid $75,000 for that, and they just think in the back of their head like, I don't have $75,000 for that.
Yep. They probably didn't either, which is why they're probably out of business now, or rebranded, or had to scurry and give up 20 years of goodwill.
I think, by the way, the reason why they should do that is the same reason why we say on like estimates in general, we should write for the contractor to do things that are both ethical and legal. You know, because we can't, just because we think nobody's going to catch you, doesn't make it right for you not to do it.
Correct.
And I think that it gets kind of baked in the cake in insurance sometimes with this, if it's not enforced.
Right.
And you know, it's not always enforced if you drive down the interstate at 120 miles an hour.
Right. Doesn't mean you didn't endanger everybody while you did it. You just got lucky and didn't hit anybody.
Yes, and I wasn't talking about my wife, just to be clear.
No, you were talking about you trying to get campaign signs out. 100 miles an hour trying to make the place.
No. You can't hang that on me, buddy.
Campaign signs you were putting out.
You cannot hang that on me.
Yeah, I can't hang it on you because you got in here moving too fast to get a picture. You're right. I can't hang it on you. So anyway, back to the beginning where we originally started. This is technical. I want you guys that are looking at this to realize it looks like a blue collar industry. It's not. We are a white collar technical service and process and documentation company. We're more closer to engineering doing controlled deconstruction than we are any of the rest of it. The problem is the work is blue collar.
Well,
Why you have to
I
do
think
all the
well, it's
documentation.
kind of like the guys at the plant who do all the life safety stuff.
Right.
They're like the most important people in the plant. They're highly paid. They're very technical. They have to do all the reporting. It's the same basic idea.
But they work in the hot, sweaty plant.
Yeah, but they work under OSHA criteria.
That's right. So, guys, this is the time to do the right thing. All right, I get it. It may work your profit margins a little, and if that's what it comes to, I'd still rather work a lower profit margin if I can't get my rate that I should get, and know that I can walk away with clean hands. What will not happen is if you do not document this, I promise you, you will not get paid. You just won't. If you don't document your drawing the way that it says every day for all those things I listed off and several more I didn't even get to, you will be getting 3 days, period. And it will be your fault. You will have done this. For people that are doing lump sum, I don't know, unless you can figure out whether that lump sum is reasonable or not. And if the carrier thinks it's reasonable, it's probably work that's under the scope that should have been performed, because that's the only way you can make it less, typically.
Well, don't they say in the docs in the standard flood policy, don't they say in there that the adjuster has the option to approve a per square foot?
Yep.
But it is solely the discretion of the adjuster.
Right.
That is a scary spot to stand in.
Well, and now you have to make it to where it's something that they won't know they get blowback on. So if they get a per square foot, someone's going to ask them, unless it's really low, someone's going to ask them a question about it.
What do you think a low number is?
Oh gosh,
3?
I have somebody that I heard that they were offering 10 a square. A major franchise was doing 10 a square foot with a 50% down.
I don't think I could get that approved. Do you?
I don't know. And this is the problem. You just don't know. If you document it and line item it out, you know. If you don't, well, you don't. And that's the problem with not knowing.
By the way,
I keep trying to get back to the actual first conversation. You have me
but
all the way out here.
The policy. I gotta ask you a question.
You want the sound bites.
It's important.
You want 15-second sound bites.
I do not. I want the whole thing.
And then you want to publish 50-second sound bites.
What are you drinking?
This is my new favorite. I don't let you can see it. It is Waterloo Blackberry Lemonade.
Is it leaded?
No. No, it's just, it tastes like blackberry and lemonades. Throw a little stevia in it, and it feels I'm not drinking water while I'm getting my water.
Okay, sounds good.
My bougie water.
Your bougie water. That is true. That is bougie water. Matter of fact,
yeah.
Thank
50
you for
cents a
owning.
piece.
Thank you for owning your bouge. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. You're welcome.
Hey, I got a question for you on O&P though. Does the policy give the contractor overhead and profit?
The policy says that overhead and profit is a part of it, and then it makes the adjuster the determinator of whether or not it's appropriate or not.
Is it a complexity?
Based on some mythically undefined complexity.
Complexity. I hate that.
Complexity. I'm sorry. How in the world can you have an entire house flood and a 4-foot gut and not have that be a complex project?
I would say just having all your employees drive an extra 2.5 hours a day makes it complex by default.
Among other things.
The fact that you can't get gas nearby and you certainly can't get food.
That would be one of those things that I would ask the adjuster, do you consider this to be a candidate for O&P? My contractor charges me O&P. What is your basis? Can you provide your written basis for what verifies O&P? It's the definition is complexity. Would you be able to explain to me what's complex? This all looks pretty complex to me. You're asking them to take readings every day. You're asking them to do psychometric and EMC measurements. You're asking them to control or demo and clean and sanitize all these materials. Is that not complex? So everything is definitions. There's no true conversation until we have verified definitions. There's no true understanding without verified definitions.
Okay, I'm gonna leave you alone. I'm gonna let you go back to whatever conversation you were having.
You won't. You're going to interrupt me in like 2 seconds. I know
I
you will.
know it's just, I'm sorry. It's just my way. I can't help it.
Okay, so I'm going to scroll back to the original. The downside is it's difficult to get them to change their mind and time consuming, although it is possible within their policy. Upside is you know what they expect, you can work within it. This is where I tell you, honestly, guys, take excellent pictures. And an insured should take their own pictures. An insured should take a full set of pictures every day before they start, every day when they finish. You cannot have too many pictures. If you have 10,000 pictures, I promise you will not go back and say you had too many pictures. All right? You just won't, because you're going to need a picture that you wouldn't have had if you didn't take the pictures.
Right.
Even for insureds, please get pictures of equipment, serial numbers on equipment, the panels of equipment showing they're actually on when you can turn them on, right? Please do that. Pretty please. Super pretty please. All right, because you're going to make everything simpler. Contractors, if you don't do that, I always tell contractors to take a stencil that's as wide as the surface is on the piece of equipment for the last 4 digits of the serial number and paint it on every side that you could ever see.
Did they see in that policy that they approve certain kinds of
They do certain kinds of equipment. The one that they're really squidgy on is air movers or air scrubbers. I'm sorry. They're weird about, see, I would have gotten to this and you squirreled me again. The air scrubbers, they expect you to set and begin to reduce very quickly. And here's, for a contractor, guys, this is what you need to know. For those of you who don't know about the 3 phases of drying, which is constant rate, falling rate 1, and falling rate 2, what they reference in their policy is, or actually in their technical document, is they're saying that, hey, we start off with free water and unbound water. Free water being water on the surface of something, unbound water being something that may be absorbed into the material but isn't held by a mechanical or chemical bond. All right, once you get water into like the cellular structure of wood, it is mechanically held inside of the cell structure and it is chemically bonded with a hydroxyl group. Spin my propeller. All right, and the bottom line is what they're trying to say is, and they're correct, by the way, this isn't something that insurance companies enforce, and they could and should. Once you've gotten rid of all of your free water, which means you've dried all your materials down to a surface relative humidity of between, or not relative humidity, but a surface equilibrium moisture content of between 30 and 28%, because there's arguments about where that is. At that level, you switch from unbound water, from free water to just unbound and bound water inside of the material. And they're right. A hurricane over the outside of that material at that point will not create more effective, more rapid drying. And if you're using a turbo or centrifugal air mover, all right, or the snout, some people know them as snouts, right? If you're using that, you need to switch it out for an axial air mover, because in reality, in the standard, they say you really only need about 2.5 miles per hour over a surface, because at that point, the air movement isn't drying anything any faster. It's just making sure that the air is getting over to the wet material and circulating the air in the room, mixing it to get back to your dehumidifier so your dehumidifier can work. So they're actually ahead of most carriers. So I said all that to say this. If you're taking your readings every day, you should know when your air movers get cut back, because your air movers should get cut back when your last monitor point drops below about 28%, not all the way through the material, but at the surface. So this is one of those moments that you should be using the little short pins for, not the screws. When you're going to dry the entire building, use your screws so you make sure you dry your entire material assembly. But when we're talking about unbound and the difference between free, unbound, and bound water, all we need is just the outside surface. That's all we're concerned about. So if you'll measure it like that, then you know, and you'll document it, write it down, and stick it in your scopes, For the first 3 days, it took us that long to get that surface to the point where all of the free water was gone and it was just bound and unbound. And then we moved back our air movers. They will pay for that. If you fail to do that and you fail to identify when that happened in writing, in big letters, really basic, simple, someone is going to insert their opinion. And when they insert your opinion, you will lose because you don't have much of a recourse in this. So this is really good contractors paying really close attention, future-proofing the arguments over the project. Fail to do that and you will have built in a landmine and someone's going to step on it or activate it for you. You're going to blow stuff up. And we don't like to blow stuff up. It's like doing this is like a game of hot potato. You just don't want to be the one.
You would think that the mitigation companies like to blow things up.
No, I think there is a profound lack of understanding, truly. Most of these people are not terrible, horrible, they're not trying to screw stuff up. It really.
Yeah, but there's a lot of these guys who's like, well, why'd you use this equipment? It's all we had in the van.
Well, and you know what? If you don't come like a professional, document like a professional, scope like a professional, don't be astonished you aren't paid like a professional.
Ooh,
sorry.
Mic drop.
Hold on. Mouse drop.
Okay.
We keep expecting everybody to expect the best of us without giving them, well, the kind of accommodation that a person expecting the best out of us would think is reasonable. This is managing expectations. You're going to manage the expectation with your insured, and you're going to manage the expectation with your adjuster, your outside and your inside adjuster. And if you are first things first, profoundly professional, and you keep that up and you make it simple for them to say yes by documenting and putting F9 notes in and things like that, you can expect a much better end result out of your contract or out of your projects. And that's a way you can serve your insureds and add value, because in reality, if it was just somebody could come in and do a terrible job of demolition and muck everything out, we have a commodity.
Well, I think you do, and I think that
Squirrel. I'm gonna start calling you Rocky. No, not that Rocky. Rocky and Bullwinkle. Rocky and Bullwinkle. That's right.
I was trying to get the cool
Rocky. You're
Rocky.
married to Natasha, right?
No. When is it appropriate for the mitigation company, since they're obviously the really key person, the really key group that shows up first? When is it appropriate for you for them to tell their insured, hey, you might need a PA?
This is such a tough question to answer.
I know, that's why I gave it to you.
Thanks, appreciate that. How about this? The moment that your education on what's reasonable, appropriate, and necessary and properly documented fails to move the people to an appropriate Oh,
you mean like if you have a terrible adjuster?
If you see that your adjuster doesn't understand the stuff we're talking about, and guys, I need you to, little star moment, right? We got people out doing this work that haven't done NFIP work in years. There's people getting qualified by the droves in online schools today. Right now, they're getting their freshly minted adjusting licenses. They will have no idea what you're talking about, only know what's given to them. Everything should be done in 3 days. You don't need anything besides what they tell you specifically they need. They will be following not the policy because they haven't had the time to read, understand, and process the policy. They're going to be working off a checklist. And contractors, if you're smart, you will ask those adjusters for their checklists, and then you will create the responses out of the policy and with the standard to what it actually says should be done. So you will help them. Don't embarrass them. Help them. In fact, if I was doing it actively as a contractor right now, I would get their list and I would send it back to them the next day with the policy provisions that said what was done. So instead of getting a factoid, they got an introduction into, we typically do this unless any of the following happen, and then we do this.
So I guess the point of the whole exercise is that this entire NFIP thing is the only policy we ever work under. that
Well,
specifies our activities.
until the wind blows. And then, guys, once the wind blows, for the contractors out there, okay, I want you to please go through. All right, you have 2 days before this storm comes through, wherever it comes. Go document, go spin yourself another Matterport, okay? And I want you to videotape somebody going through and marking out all the walls, all right, the walls above 4 feet, and all of your ceilings, all right, at dry standard, okay? We need to know what pre-loss is. Charge for it. And by the way, here's one of the things you need to know. If you will write a drying plan for NFIP, a drying plan includes a variety of things. I'll come back to that in a second. But if you'll do a drying plan, they will pay you to do the drying plan and the initial inspection, which means if you don't do the drying plan, what are they probably not going to pay you for?
The drying plan.
And the inspection that goes along with it. So that 2, 4, 6, 8 hours that you spend doing the drying plan, all right, doing your initial moisture mapping, doing all of that. Pardon me?
Specify what they pay for it, or it's just a market condition?
Time. It's time. And if we can ever get over to the other part of it, I actually have it highlighted. So read the policy. I want to say it's 79 or 80, somewhere around in there, where they identify it. And I could be wrong because I'm just remembering from yesterday's perusal. But pay attention to that. If you don't do the drying plan, they're not going to accept it. If you don't do the calculations, they want your air mover calculation. They want your dehumidifier calculation. They want your air scrubber calculation too, if they're going to have any shot of paying for that. All right? They don't want to use spider boxes, guys. They don't want to use portable generators. They want you to use onshore power. So if you don't have a relationship with an engineer or an electrical guy who can come and certify the structure as needing repaired, but sufficient for emergency use, and then I would get the insured to sign off on it. All right? Because you don't know what's happened. Every once in a while, a house does burn down. And the problem is if you don't have power, they don't want to pay for it because they don't want to use generators. But if you turn it back on, it's possible to create an issue and burn the house down. Then the proximate cause for the water law or for the fire is the hurricane, and then there's no coverage under the regular household policy. So, you're kind of a little bit trapped if you do, trapped if you don't, but somehow you got to do it. So chances are it's probably not going to be an issue, but still pay attention. So let's go back to just for a second for what the drying plan actually requires. It requires a narrative. It requires a full structures moisture map. And it says that an indication of quality is an actual moisture map, not just a floor plan. An indication of a quality project is that. And I don't know if you want me to read between the lines for you or not, but they're going to think you're a schlump if you're not doing that. All right? Put your equipment where your equipment is in the room. Doesn't tell you to do it, but make it simple for them so they know where it is. Do your dehumidifier calculation. Do your air mover calculation. Identify the points in your project where you're going to reduce it. Say you're going to reduce your air movers from turbos and change them out with axials at between 28 and 30% equilibrium moisture content in your wood materials. Do that. All right? Actually do your calculation. Do a real true drying plan. Indicate whether or not you have air conditioning or not. I don't know how to fix that you don't have air conditioning and they don't want you to dry the structure until that happens. Again, I saw that in somebody's write-up, all right, that was running around the forums, which means it might be on the list. Guys, if you can get the list from the carrier or their checklist, and you see that on the checklist, that would be the time to challenge that. I've read through the whole policy. I don't see that on the policy. I don't see it on the underlying sub document either from 2013. All right, I don't see it there either. We just need to make sure that we're not going to do this and not get paid. Guys, if you don't do all the contents processing, all the demolition, all the cleaning, verify category 1, verify condition 1, they will not pay you a penny. You hear me? Not one penny. If you run stabilization equipment, know that you're not going to get paid for it by NFIP, but you might find that your insured is very happy to pay for it for 3 or 4 days while that's going on, because it's their policy limit they're up against. Remember, NFIP doesn't have the same policy limits for a house. So sometimes they're working back against something where they need to preserve it, and to spend $5,000, $10,000 on dehumidification may be super okay with them. Write a separate contract and then put the note that the dehumidification for stabilization was paid for over in a separate agreement. And then you just will never fight the fight. So I think that's it. So you want to go back to some actual granular stuff, because believe it or not, again, we've covered kind of the broad strokes without looking at the way the policy actually reads.
Yeah, I'll take some granular.
Can you take some granular? Can you stand yourself a little granular? You may have to fix this in post, because I don't know how it's going to cut stuff out. Do you see how this is cutting me out?
Yeah.
My picture? So you might have to force it to show the rest of it.
Okay.
Because I can't move that sucker over and then you can't see me. Don't go cut me in half. I am not half a man. I am fully a man. All right. So here's a couple things. I'm on page, I don't know if you can see it. You can't really see it over here, but in the upper right-hand corner, in a spot that you can't see until he expands it, you should see the size or the page that we're actually on. You see down in the bottom where it says Claims Journey, page 36. Notice it says in the bottom right-hand corner that it is June 2023 edition. Until I did that, and that's back to notes. What did I do? 35, 36. All right, so let's do a couple things here. We're starting talking out of, there are some contractors that you can bring in from the outside, but I want you to notice that what it says right here, only an insurer or YWO vendor, which excludes adjusting firms and independent adjusters, can hire outside professional services, which means that you as an insured, you have to press your adjuster if you think there's something that requires somebody's specific attention. If you need me on a project, or David or a PE on a project, which they might not accept us, you're going to want to make sure that they'll accept us. All right, a PD they have to accept because they put it in their policy. But the rest of us, not so much. But notice, you can't trigger it. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but the insurer or vendor has to do that. So when the cause or extent of structural damage to the building, including foundation damage, is not known or presents a challenge to the claim, the adjuster should submit a written request to the insurer. The adjuster should submit. Okay, hold on. Okay. The adjuster should submit a written request to the insurer at the time of the preliminary report submission. The request should include any policyholder assertion or statement, which means that to get them rolling, you must put in writing that you have a concern, Mr. or Mrs. Policyholder. Contractor, ask your policyholder to make an assertion or a statement about the damage to the building, and then put in pictures. All right, including exterior, the underside, and this is more for structural stuff, but it doesn't have to be just that. It should include interior and exterior photos of structurally related damage, etc. When to involve an outside professional service. I'm on page 37 of the claim journey, table 6. Look at interior, if you can get it past my head. Here we go. Any evidence of moisture, leaks, or hydrostatic pressure present in floors or walls. So learn how to read this. Any evidence of moisture, leaks, or hydrostatic pressure. Not all, but or. Present where? In either the floors or the walls. Let's talk about wind-driven rain. You had a flood, but there's wind with it. All right? They'd probably want something like that. They'll fight that and say that that's your wind policy, but still, there you go. Any flood-related, non-porous ceramic or porcelain tile, all right? Or the installation or the like installed to the concrete substrate. So any flood-damaged, non-porous ceramic or porcelain. Now, guys, realize that ceramic may be non-porous on the top, but the clay underneath it is very porous, still qualifies. Porcelain is generally filed all the way through, but can be an issue as well. And your issue here isn't necessarily that your floor is damaged. The issue here is that you can weaken the bond with the thin set. The concrete can be washed out and chemically changed, number one. And number two, you can't clean for that incredibly dirty, filthy water underneath the tile that's trapped in there. And every time you re-clean, you're going to re-wet it. And when you re-wet it, you make a path from that well of water, that well of contamination, through the grout, and it pulls back up and it recontaminates. So this is a real issue. Now, there's some other things in here, but we're kind of talking about flood at the moment. So there you go. There's, of course, structural elements. Any evidence of significant cracks in interior finishes, such as cracks above doors or windows, in the corners or wall materials. When you get a house flooded, especially if the water table underneath it changes, you can change the way a building performs. It warps, it racks, doesn't support everything. Now we're into structural, we're going to knock down your house territory if we don't underpin it. You need to have that out there. All right. In general, to resolve questions concerning causation or repair methodology, you can have somebody come in if you need clarification on means and methods. I need to do it this way in this order. It needs to be this much. I need this much time. I ignored my asbestos. By the way, another startling moment, OSHA's requirement or rule for demolition about asbestos, hear me insureds, hear me contractors. Your obligation to check for asbestos did not go away because of this. It did not. It is 100% still required. And it's not just buildings that were built prior to the statute, okay, in 1982 or 86? 86, right? 86?
86.
Regardless. Guys, drywall isn't the only place there's chrysotile and other asbestos-containing fibers. Brand new houses can have it in it. Brand new houses. 30-40% of the brand new houses that we sample have it somewhere in the drywall, somewhere in the thin set, or somewhere in the joint compound, or maybe even it's a naturally in the texture. It's a naturally occurring mineral fiber. It's buried in the ground with the gypsum when they dig it up, and there's no way around it. So those of you who think you can get away without sampling for this, shame on you. All right? You don't want to know what the OSHA fine for this is. You really don't want to know. All right, let's see. And I think that's probably that. It's probably that on this page. Enough for that. Let's move on. Insurers must comply with the following requirements. I'm going to let you read through that, guys. This is on page 38. But there's certain things they have to do. If you're going to have a final report from anybody outside, realize that the reports have to comply with this. When making claims decisions, insurers may only rely on the findings, recommendation, and the opinion of the report submitted by what? A professional engineer. And all of the engineers, you see all those little things right there? Guys, they have to have it like that or they're going to ignore it. These guys will, here we go. Once they touch your file the first time, all right, your field adjuster will not touch it again. Once your desk adjuster touches it the first time, if they can't close it, that will find the bottom of their file, and every other easier file will get closed before your more difficult file will. Which is why having all the things we talked about, estimates and scopes and line items and things you just don't have to argue about, that's why having that stuff done up front is imperative, guys. Not optional, imperative, unless you'd like to get buried at the bottom of the stack for months and months and months and months. Most people are there because they stick themselves there. They are, and only you can prevent forest fires. All right, back to this. Let's see what else we got. Insurers and representatives, this is on outside professional services, may not adopt any practice that may influence the opinions or recommendations of the professional service. That means that you have to be aware that they're supposed to be neutral and independent. if you begin as a contractor, or more specifically as an insured, to feel like they're not being neutral and independent, they're being unduly influenced, then you need to know that this policy exists. This is your policy. I want you to know that you get to do with your policy what you want to do with your policy. You as an insured can say anything you want about your policy. Contractors, be aware, you don't want to do unlicensed practice of public adjusting. You don't want UPA, all right? And you don't want to do unlicensed practice of law. Don't do that. Don't be a ding dong. All right, controlled substances. If you happen to be in Florida, Florida is not really particularly pro marijuana at this point. Individuals may be, but the state kind of dims it, views it dimly when you have that or other use and you're not properly licensed for it. I want you to realize that in the event that they see anything, okay, when an adjuster observes or suspects that a controlled substance is being used, manufactured, or distributed, where'd it go? There we go. Used, manufactured, distributed to property, they must conduct a reasonable investigation to confirm the use of the property and report the information to the insurer to confirm coverage. They have a way to be able to do that. All right? If a controlled substance is present at the described location, it is necessary to determine whether the location is obsolete. Just, guys, don't leave bongs out. Don't leave needles out. This is another reason we want full PPE for our people. You don't know what you're dealing with until, well, you've dealt with it. You don't know where you're reaching. Be very careful. Have gloves that can't be penetrated. All right? People get stuck every single time doing muck outs and crap like that. And you just don't know. You can't see it. All right? Watch this. NFIP will void a policy where it discovers the property is primarily and principally used for the manufacture or distribution of a controlled substance. They must void a flood policy and deny coverage where it determines a claim is filed that is more than likely that not the primary principal use of the insured structure has been the manufacture or distribution of a controlled substance. So anyway, by the way, you really don't want people wandering around like that. That's kind of stupid. You don't want to do that. All right. Remember I told you that flood operates differently in an order than restoration, normal water damage at a homeowner's or a structure does. Watch what they actually say directly. Because tear out starts the repair process, all right? Right? Nothing starts for drying until we have demolition of all the materials inside the project. It just doesn't. Category 1, condition 1, before anything else starts. Now, here's them talking about how you're writing the estimate. A receipt or invoice should be available for the adjuster if the policyholder hires a professional service, okay? The adjuster should use the pricing charged by the professional services provided is for the coverage property with pricing that is reasonable and customary to the loss and location, which means reasonable and customary includes the fact that you're in the middle of a storm surge. It doesn't have to be the published price. We won't know what Xactimate thinks about this for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. All right? But your contractor might have to identify that. All right? He might have to tell them why it is reasonable and customary. Charges for items that are not covered property should not be included on the claim, like utility repairs. Costs for tear out can be based on market conditions following a flood event. Peak pricing likely occurs during the first weeks immediately after the event. So if you're in the first weeks immediately after the event, the insured should know it's going to be more expensive, and you should be putting it on your scope that your scope is more expensive because even the flood policy acknowledges that. Now, the policy giveth, the policy takes away. As time passes, the pressure for immediate response for tear out work decreases as more services become available to the policy owner or property owner. The price for tear out should continue to decline over time as the fewer opportunities for work become available. In order to justify an exceptionally priced invoice for tear out, adjusters should be aware of market conditions and document the same in the claim file. Guys, they're not qualified to make that determination. They don't know your business. You need to do that. You need to tell them why it's a different number than what is published in Xactimate and why. Or do average work get average pay? Do crappy work get crappy pay?
You say all the mean things.
Turn your estimate from a professional declaration of what's necessary to be done, why and how, into basically open-ended invitation to argue with you because their opinion is different than your facts, and you did that to yourself and to your client.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's any other time that we have that we can't say that we were working within the policy language.
Yeah.
Because,
Well, and you can quote it.
Yeah.
You can identify that. Please note that our line item pricing is this. Here's the additional expenses. Here's my per diem added in. Here's this, here's that, here's the other. Separate out your per diem for your guys, but if you do it, for God's sakes, please keep timesheets. Please have receipts. If you're going to charge them for per diems, charge them for actual. And then put your OMP on it. And by the way, that's complexity. All right, continuing on. All right, a couple things to remember. At the very top, general contractors must itemize repairs on a line-by-line and not a room-by-room basis, which means no lump sums, you ding-dongs. All right? If you lump sum, someone's going to pop you up, remind you of this, and then you're going to get to, unfortunately, deal with that. Okay? Next, let's go down to the next one. The adjuster should request that the policyholder, because this is all about you still, insured, the policyholder obtain an increased, and this is if they don't give you a line item by line item thing, the adjuster should request. So if they give you lump sum, expect your adjuster to ask you for an increased itemization from the contractor if a room by room estimate is not available. The adjuster should also request a copy of the contractor's signed repair agreement. If you don't have a signed repaired agreement with your contractor, then guess what they're going to think? They're going to think that you're transient. That's probably not in your best interest. Okay? All right.
Why are they going to think you're transient? What does that mean?
That means you're going to come and go. That's transient. Alrighty. The SPIF, all right, that's NFIP, at sections 7.g and 7.h requires the policyholder to provide signed repair agreements and estimates that are intended to be used for actual repairs. Which means if you think you're going to take that contractor's scope and not use that contractor, all right, that's going to present a policy problem for you. Don't screw contractors like that. They have an enormous amount of time, energy, effort, money, and overhead built into creating these scopes for you if they do it right. Please don't play with them. If they do the first part right, you should hold on to them. Chances are they're going to do the rest of it right too. All right, the signed agreement right here, this signed agreement helps to determine if the estimate provided is legitimate and not an estimate used for insurance purposes or an offer to repair. So if you do not have this, they're going to think that it is not legitimate. And it's so simple. Sign it, accept it, put a date on it. It's a little thing, but this is what activates the policy. Not that I'm adjusting a policy right now. I'm just reading the policy document and interpreting it like a normal layperson would, for those of you that would like to suggest that I am participating in the unlicensed practice of public adjusting. Okay, repairs after prior loss. This is the section that says writing the building estimate continued. Repairs after prior loss are best supported with copies of actual proof of repairs and replacements, such as repair estimates with corresponding or canceled checks. If you give them a canceled check for work that is identified and defined, chances are you're going to get paid for it. If you have the ability to pay them, that's going to establish indemnity typically. All right, when past repair documentation is not available, the adjuster should request and review the prior claim file against the current claim notes. Guys, if you didn't repair it from the last storm and you got paid for it, guess what? You're probably not going to get paid for again. You left all that brown shag or orange shag carpet in because you were really attached to it. You've been paid for it once. I don't know. You can read the policy. You tell me what you think. All right. Visual observation of certain installed building materials photographed at the inspection can document recent repairs. That means they want you to take pictures. When documenting a recommendation in this fashion, the adjuster must make certain whether the evidence of repairs is clear in photographs. So not only does it have to look right, but remember I asked you to turn on your time and date stamp? That has time and date stamp, folks. Then they know that you made it at a particular time. Don't make them wonder. Wonder is great for children, terrible for this. Okay? Policyholder information, estimating practices to help support the recommendation to policyholder. Flood cleanup. Notice the first line item with the water depth. They want you to tell at the beginning of your scope, how deep was it? The exterior deep and the interior depth, because outside doesn't necessarily mean inside. Lots more in here about how they pay for stuff, guys. I'm ignoring it because, well, there's not that much time. All right, we're coming up. You know, before I said it was page 76 and I lied. It was page 76 in the PDF. It was page 48 in the actual document. Okay? So here are some things that we need to be aware of. When your contractor is writing the scope, all right, your contractors, please figure out how old these building materials are, write them in, and then depreciate them, because it says the adjuster should apply depreciation to the material, labor, and equipment usage, including overhead and profit. Ooh, it says you should have O&P in there. And sales tax on all claim replacement items of property. If you will do this in advance for the contractor or for the adjuster, if you will have a schedule of the drywall is this old, the floor is this old, the trim is this old, the door is this old, the paint is this old, the cabinets are this old, the appliances are this old. If you will write that down for them, if you will include it in their actual, both write it and include it. If you'll put that into the scope, what you'll do is you'll make it easy for them to do their job, because this can take quite a bit of time. And a lot of times they'll forget and they won't ask and they will assume. So if you've written it down and you include it, you will be way ahead and you will make friends out of this guy.
But we still do not depreciate non-material.
And this is a problem. It's very difficult to turn off depreciation on labor. There's no way to do it that I'm aware of still in Xactimate.
Yes, there is. You just have to turn off non-material depreciation. It's just they named it in such a weird way that people don't recognize what it is. Non-material means labor.
Yeah. So make sure, guys, non-material. It's a set. Is it in the setup? It's in each individual file setup under
it's in the parameters.
Parameters. Okay. So that's, that should be a little star right there. Everybody needs to know that. All claimed replacement items must reflect depreciation regardless of whether the loss qualifies for replacement cost or AC. The adjuster should document the claim to support the rate of depreciation or lack of depreciation. You determine how long it should be based upon the IRS. Guys, contractors should know this. Your adjusters are not going to get this. They're just not. And then here's the last important one. When considering the rate of depreciation for any replaced item, okay, of property, the adjuster should take into account previous repairs, modifications, which may extend the life of this item beyond its original condition. All right? They tell you you can do it. You just have to know you can stick it in there, and that's how you have to do it. The square foot method starts here on page 49. I'm not going to go through it, but what we do need to see here is this. When you're doing an adjuster determined drying charge, right, you ready? When a policyholder submits an invoice for drying and a drying log is not provided or is not properly completed, the adjuster should not include the invoice drying allowances in the insurance estimate because the drying was performed outside of the industry standard ICRC S under 2021. All right? That means you're not going to get paid for it. Consequently, invoice charges do not include evidence documenting how wet materials were before the drying started. Remember me talking about between 28 and 30% equilibrium moisture content to identify you've left constant rate drying and are moving over towards falling rate 1. All right? If drying progressed because of the drying technician's effort, or if the materials targeted for drying were actually dried as charged. In these instances, the adjuster should determine the type, quantity, and duration of drying equipment on the claim. Like these guys are going to know how to do that. However, these allowances should not include usage more than 72 hours or 3 days. Now, of all the things they're going to remember, I promise you they remember that one. It's all over their cheat sheet. You're going to have to do this, all right? NFIP insurers and adjusters should do what is possible to help the policyholder to avoid drying allowances based on this method, which means that if they aren't documenting it right, they're telling their people to call you out and try to deter you from using someone who isn't doing it right. So I want you to know that their policy, in my reading of it, says that they're actively required to do that. You need to know this. This is best achieved by informing the policyholder about the structural drying, its requirements, and the first notice of loss, contact call, or the site inspection. So you may be inviting the carrier to fight you up front. You may be inviting that by how you're handling this. Moving on, dehumidifiers. In determining the quantity of dehumidifiers, first calculate the dehumidifier capacity using the revised S500 formula in W13025, see Appendix D. Guys, if we go to that, I want you to see what it is. Everybody talks about this. Notice the date, May 23rd. All right, you're going to read through this. There's tons of stuff in this that is not compliant with the standard of care currently, but this is what they're going to do. All right. If you don't have it, you can find it. It's not hard. All right. It's been a part of the manual. Contractors need to have this because unless it's written differently in the current one, then you know what's going to happen here. Oh, where am I here? Page 262. That policy is a honking policy. Look at that, man. I got pretty darn close to that. Alrighty, so I want you to realize there's an active link inside of that, and that active link will take you there. Now, here's something you really need to know, contractors. Allowing some additional dehumidifier capacity on an actual drying job should be expected. And is a good practice for successful prompt drying. So here's what they're really saying. Do the calculation based on the short form, but in reality, you're probably going to need more, and it's probably a good thing. So that's why I say use your detailed form, calculate what it really is, and then remember this exists and put this little section there where they acknowledged short form doesn't get it done as quick as you'd like. Okay? Next one. When determining the number and type of air movers, the adjuster should first understand the type of water being dried out. During the first 24 hours or so of drying, the water targeted for drying is on the surface in pores of salvageable materials, salvageable floors, wall framing and sheathing. The water is known as surface and free water, respectively. With the proper dehumidification capacity and number of air movers, surface and free water is quickly removed. Don't let them figure out how long it takes to do that. You tell them, based on your documentation, your moisture mapping, how long it took you to do that. Most of these air movers should be removed. This type of water, ground water, is not removed by high velocity air mover from carpet dryers. Most of these movers should be removed. Sorry, I'm fighting with this. When the interior walls are partially or fully removed, fewer fans that focus on moving a higher volume of air like axial fans aid in the bound water. So you can use your turbos, centrifugal fans when you start. But 2 or 3 days in, you really should be switching out. Now, make sure you do your equipment decon. All right? Because you can't take it on. Sometimes they'll pay for it, sometimes they won't. You just need to know that. Okay? Heaters. If you're going to use a heater, you can't do it until the surface and free water is almost or entirely removed. If you use it, sometimes if you use it and it's still too wet and it gets too humid, it can create additional damage. This type of damage is not the direct result of the physical loss by or from flood and is not covered on a claim under the SFIP. Which means if you're going to use heat, be aware that if there's any mold in there, they're going to consider it's yours. You did that. Here is what a drying invoice with a properly completed drying log looks like. When the drying service follows the industry standards, the drying technicians enters all required data in the drying log. What's that next word, Dave, if you're looking over that way? In the drying log, what's that word? It starts with a B.
Required data in the drying log before starting
Oh, yeah.
the job. Before.
Yeah.
The B, yes, the B.
Before, the B word. Yes, before starting the job. All right? That's a drying plan. Okay? The drying technicians enters all the required data in the drying log before starting the job. This data helps to guide the technician in terms of the number, type, and quantity of drying equipment to use for the next 24 hours. So what they've just done is they've just told everybody that the first 24 hours is different than the rest of the 24 hours. You will have to tell them if it's different. Otherwise, they expect you to run for 24 hours and then change everything. You're going to have to tell them if it's not proper to change in for that first 24 hours. The technician should enter new required data into the log at least every 24 hours until when? Until the drying goal is achieved. Every day until the drying goal is achieved. When the drying invoice is documented this way, the claim can account for the cost to dry the structure using the professional's invoice drying charges. Remember, right up above it, it's like if it doesn't have these criteria, you can't accept the invoice drying charges. But if it does have these criteria, if it is properly completed drying log, remember right up here, all right, if it's a properly completed drying log, where was it? No. Submits an invoice in a drying log. The drying log is not provided or is not properly completed. Not properly completed. All right? You have to do all the rest of that stuff. However, if it is properly completed, it says, hey, you can use this, including, using the professional's invoice drying charges, including costs for containment, which means you don't get containment unless you have this. All right? Containment, what is that? What's that word? I got something on top of it. I can't see it. Containment that is reasonable and customary to the loss and location, ducting, heaters, floor for the initial assessment, daily monitoring, equipment takedown, overhead, and profit. They've just told you if you keep your documentation right, they will pay for all of that. That's the way I read that. Just in case you forgot about it from like a page up or down, before accepting an invoice as properly supported by the drying logs, the adjuster should understand what a properly completed drying log is. See W13025A. Guys, look at this. A record of daily temperature and relative humidity from inside and outside. Moisture readings in the recorded location of affected and unaffected building materials in what? Each room. You'd be laughing if you were paying attention, David.
I am paying
No,
attention.
you're not. You're all looking at the pretty picture. You're probably reading the policy.
I was reading your document so I could see it a little closer because it's hard to keep up with you because your propeller spins so much.
Yeah, okay. All right. Drying goal and dry standard for the affected materials. Daily operating status of the building system and all dehumidification equipment. Name, model, and if you're smart, serial number and capacity of all dehumidification, air moving, and heating equipment. Notice they don't stick air scrubbers in there because they don't generally seem to think you need them. The reason they don't think you need them, guys, is if you clean everything down to category 1, condition 1, and then you negatively pressurize it, there's no reason to be concerned about it because you shouldn't have any contaminants left, therefore you don't need an air scrubber. Guys, if you're not running air scrubbers in your demolition and your people aren't in full and proper PPE, you're going to create yourself a liability, an OSHA liability. Please do the right thing. Just because they won't pay for it doesn't mean you don't need to do it. And guys, the insured purchased the NFIP policy. It doesn't cover everything. It doesn't cover everything. Most insureds understand that you protecting your people is a part of it. And if they don't, then maybe you need to move down the road to somebody who does. All right, next, the make and model of the moisture reading equipment. And by the way, I would add to this the setting that it's on and a meter calibration so that we know we're dealing with the correct number. Water class, water category, and water class type, cubic footage of the affected area. Guys, the affected area is the entire house if you've had a flood. And then here's your last little note. A moisture map is not required, but is a sign of quality. I said that. I think I got it right. Here we go in their little subsection here. 8 required elements for all drying logs. Record the daily temperatures and relative humidity readings, and you just read all through them. So this is what your people should be doing. If you're a contractor and you're not doing this, go fix your records. If you're an insured listening to this and your contractor doesn't do this, I would hand it to him and ask him to see the records every day because eventually this is your reimbursement. You owe the contractor for the work. Whether you get reimbursed for it or not is whether or not they do this. And it's going to be, if you don't make your contractor do what this says, it will be your fault because you didn't comply with your policy. It will be regrettable, but it will be so. So there you go. Here's one more thing I want to get here because it's all a part of this. 2 things. See where it says claim handlers should understand that a drying invoice that demonstrates insufficient dehumidification capacity includes only carpet dryers when the flood is above the floor level, does not demonstrate a declining use of air movers, or does not involve heaters. Look at this. During the last part of the drying, does not involve or follow industry standards. Now, this is super weird. They're saying that you have to have heat at the end. Do be aware that you can use heat from your HVAC if it's running to do this. Be aware that you can control your temperature to drive the temperatures high enough to create the additional vapor pressure in the materials by adding heat energy to them, increasing the vapor pressure in them. You can do that, but it can't be so much that you can't hit grain depression on your dehumidifiers, guys. Once you're above about 90 degrees, there's hardly any dehumidifiers at low grains that can actually produce anything else. They just turned into heaters. So be aware of that. Here's the important one. This is what I want you to get here. Last two things. See, I keep adding one. If drying charges exceed 3 days, the drying log must specify the reason. That's narrative, and include supporting evidence. That's your documentation. If there is no such explanation or supporting evidence justifying the additional drying, then the log is not proper. See method 2. A drying log that skips 1 or more days of follow-up monitoring is not complete and is improper. See method 2. You guys call me. I have OmniSense. I rep for OmniSense. If you don't have it, you should. It doesn't say that it has to be on site. It just says it has to be monitored. My contractors don't have to go every day. My contractors can go when there's a reason to go. And you should too. So if you don't have OmniSense and you aren't using remote monitoring, you should call me. All right, lastly, cause crawl spaces are exposed to outside air or without climate control, dehumidification is not effective and should not be part of the drying. So let me tell you how to convert this. If you have it open to the outside, you can't use dehumidifiers. I think you could argue for heat, but you can't use dehumidifiers.
But didn't it also say you can't do any of this without air conditioning?
That's the next part. Or are without climate control. Because what happens is, and I think this may be where they're getting the air conditioner has to be functioning, because I don't see it any other place, any place. And if you find it or anybody else finds it, give it to me. I admit that at some point in the 300 pages, it more resembled a scanning than a super attention-laden thing. Help me if I'd missed it. But what they realize is that the best dehumidifier in the house is the air conditioner. It's the biggest one. And the air conditioner will make the rest of the dehumidifiers operate more effectively by keeping the temperature down. That's why they want it. They don't want to pay without it on, or would prefer for it to be on as a result of that. Going down here, if exposed floor flaming in the crawl space is inundated or mechanically drying is needed to reduce moisture levels after the flood to prevent damage to the undamaged property from condensation, moisture, or mold growth, the claim can account for drying not longer of 72 hours. Following industry standards, this drying allowance should represent the placement of a single air mover with a heater in front of each vent on the windward side around the crawl space. An allowance of air movers and heaters should not account for placement inside the crawl space, in front of vents, on the downside area around the crawl space. So guys, that's a very specific installation, okay? Last but not least, once damage removal, talking about concrete. Once damage removal, cleaning and treating are performed and drying is complete, generally within 72 hours, wet concrete should be left to dry on its own. Considering the installation of flooring finishes is typically held off until all other interior repairs are completed, so wet concrete floors will generally dry by the time the repair is ready to install or restore the floors. However, if rainfall, a lowland grade, poor drainage, absorbent soils keep the soil wet, concrete in direct contact with this will not dry. The prolonged wetness of concrete is not the result of a direct physical loss by or from flood, and the cost to continually dry it should not be included in the claim under SFIP.
Is that true, by the way, about the
No.
that it'll dry by itself?
If you give it long enough with the right thing, if you let it go through a winter cycle and a warm summer cycle and stuff like that, it will generally come to a state that may be where it may be acceptable to do it. It's not whether water is in concrete, it's the equilibrium relative humidity that's in the concrete when you put a finished material on top of it that holds the moisture in. And what does that equilibrium moisture content do to the ability of your finished material to adhere? And does it cause deterioration of the material, the glues, the underlayments, things like that? Which is, if you guys want to know how to do that, I can help you with concrete drying, contact me. But I'm driven by the manufacturer's installation instructions. My job is not to say something's too wet or too dry. My job is to say, I have to be able to install. Listen to me, guys, I'm giving you $1 million here. I'm giving you the ability, all right, to be able to do what you need to do. My job is to produce an environment that will allow the material that's being installed on it to be successfully installed and a warranty to be put on the labor and the material installation. That's what I'd have to drive for, all right? Concrete drying is often necessary to do that, all right? It just is. And if your insured wants to a particular material on top and the installation instructions require a particular equilibrium relative humidity, not moisture content, but relative humidity, read the instructions for them, for the material instructions on substrates. It's specific, and they will not warranty it if it isn't. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, if you don't hire a contractor to come out and use an in situ method, which means they're going to put a sensor in based upon the, what is that? What's the document? The ASTM F21, all right, tells you how you're supposed to take readings in concrete for in situ readings. Before you put in your flooring, you realize that nobody will warrant your flooring. If you allow them to put some kind of wonder goo on top of your concrete, all right, it may work, it may not work. I do a lot of projects behind wonder goo that wasn't so wonderful. At that point, we call that wonder poo because it did not work and it stunk up the place and stunk up the job. All right, drying concrete takes time. Yes, it does. Folks, here's a really good one for you. Contractors, lay down the thinnest foam doesn't have a vapor barrier in it, and throw away carpet, the cheapest carpet on the planet, and give them a sacrificial surface to live on for a year until you can come back and get the sensor or the meter or the slab in the relative humidity range that it's supposed to be for that. Okay? It'll get nice and sticky on job. And here's one nice thing for you as a contractor. If you're putting something like that down every place and they know you're going to come back, it's quick installation. It's the easiest installation of anything that's going to go down, right? You can get it done fast and it's responsible. It still lets the floor come to equilibrium. It may take the better part of a year to happen, but it will eventually come to equilibrium. And one more, this is on overhead and profit. Add overhead and profit to an estimate when the complexity of the repairs requires coordination by a general contractor at a typical industry standard of 10% overhead and 10% profit. The adjuster should evaluate each claim and document support of their decision. How about you tell them why it's complex enough to require O&P so that they can point and say, that's what he said.
Yeah, you can tell them that you had to listen to David Sweet for like an hour to just be able to coherently talk to them, and that alone should get them O&P.
There you go. It should. We'll see. So anyway, there's so much more, guys. If you continue on in that document, maybe I'll do that a little bit later. 2 hours is enough and my throat hurts. I've apparently overspoke.
Well, your bougie water will help you.
My 50-cent can of bougie water, yeah. As you talk on your $5,000 camera. Yeah.
It's not a $5,000 camera.
It
Don't
is.
say that. Don't tell people that. Don't tell people that. It's not a $5,000 camera.
If I really want to get you, I'll tell them how much your art glass costs. So just be nice to me. Just saying. Be nice to me. Not so bougie. You and your cat and your 17 dogs, and I only have one dog.
This right here, this is a bougie camera. This is a bougie camera. There's nothing about this that isn't bougie.
And a bougie lens.
It's 106 megapixels, and it's a medium format camera. most of the lenses for it cost as much as most cameras. I don't have a lot of lenses, but when you just have to go to court and you want to be able to blow it up like it's, something out of Sports Illustrated, it's just good.
I understand.
And it's not bougie, it's a tool.
It's not
If we
bougie if
want to
it's a
do
tool.
bougie tools, we can talk about some of your bougie tools for sure.
Gosh, man, so ugly, so difficult.
So
I just had to
it's
notice.
some moderately good news for you.
What's that?
Some of the models pushed it south of you.
I just heard that. I don't know how. I never know how accurate this is. That it just strengthened up.
It is strengthening up, but they say it's going to go south of you. Well, I said that online while we were in this meeting, and everybody flamed me and sent me every model going straight through your house.
Yeah, I know. That's okay. I'm telling you, we got a little old grandma out there kneeling somewhere praying, saying, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." I promise you, there's some little lady out there and all of heaven and earth saying, "Well, I guess we get to go somewhere else." Now, the real problem is if there's competing grandmas and it doesn't know where to go. So I don't know.
That's kind of the point. That's why it would stink to be God, because you would have competing requests all the time.
Yeah, I know, and that's one of those tough. It's one of those tough. Which grandma wins? I don't know. My grandma's holier than yours.
Oh man, you got a busy week coming up?
Well, if we got to leave, I do.
Yeah.
I have an entire office. We're working on our server backups and relocations so we don't go down. And thankfully, I already have places to go. So we have our exit. We spent 3 hours yesterday taking down the yard around the house and getting everything squared away, which, we already did that. We just spent a week cleaning up from the first one. Because Lean gave us 80, 90 mile an hour winds. Blew an entire tree over on my wife's car.
Really?
Yep, I got to cut that one up. I got to be lumberjack again. See, for all you folks that don't think I actually do the work, I still drive buildings. I still cut trees off cars. I just do it slower and pant a lot more than I used to. But I still do it. Yeah, it was I think it was 87-foot tree.
Oh, man.
And it literally tipped right over on the root ball. It didn't crush it. So the wind blew, came back around, and it laid on top of the car with the root ball and everything on it.
So how much is the repair on that?
We'll see. It's at Nissan right now.
Wow.
It's my wife's purple party bus.
Purple party.
My wife is and absolutely believes that she is royalty. So even her van is purple. She is the Lavender Flash.
Lavender Flash.
That's what her friends call her. That was her nickname, was the Lavender Flash, because she had a little bit of a problem with that right foot. The right foot was in a constant spasm.
Yes,
like she was on point.
You know that my bride got pulled over yesterday while I was actually on the phone with you.
Yeah, she did. And what happened? Because it was a better than anticipated outcome, as I recall.
He let her go since she was doing God's work.
There you go. Because we won't tell you what kinds of nothing at all.
Do not do that.
Let's just say that her cargo could be considered politically explosive, depending on who.
You're killing me, man. You're killing me.
I'm not just saying. And by the way, guys, please stop all this nonsense. Between parties, please stop this. If you're getting your news from a mainstream media source, right or left, it might not be a lie, but it is heavily shifted, heavily shaded. Please stop doing that. If you want to know what President Trump said, go listen to President Trump's speech. If you want to know what Kamala said, go listen to their speech. Don't trust any of these ding-dongs to decide what you're kind of trying to do here. And don't think that the people across the street is a libtard or a MAGA idiot. All right, those are your people. And you know what? When it comes time for a hurricane, all that bullshit stops and we start behaving like Americans again.
That's right.
All right? So how about we start behaving like Americans regardless of whether or not the actual hurricane hits or you have to be put in a position like the Twin Towers fall. Start becoming responsible. Do your own damn research. Pay attention. Pay attention to what's actually said, not what somebody else says is said. Start treating your neighbor like they're your friend, because you're going to do life with these people. You got to live with them. You can completely disagree. David and I are probably politically, party-wise, completely, yet we agree on 96% of everything we agree upon. And the reason we are so far apart is because all that BS that everybody's doing and they're doing it to manipulate you. They know exactly how to push your buttons. They make possible these entire debates where the debate isn't about an issue. The debate is them running off 15 tipping point little segments of speeches that you've been conditioned to respond a particular way to, so you can't actually have a conversation about who believes what. Be smart. Don't let people suck you into this. Don't be a sheeple, all right? And I don't care whether you blue or red or whatever the independent color is. I don't care. Don't be a sheeple regardless. Get it directly, guys. All right? What's going on is important, and the person across the street is not your problem. The politician in D.C. is probably your problem.
Yeah.
So anyway.
But we can all agree that our governor is a problem in Florida.
I am not enjoying
this business. We can agree with that.
As I am, if you haven't figured out, I am pretty red. I am not a fan of what our governor has done. And guys, start looking into what he's done with just realize there's a lot of stuff that went through that got absolutely no publishing, and we will have insurance reform. All right. This thing's going to come across, if it becomes a category 3 and it wipes across either Tampa or wipes across Bradenton, Sarasota, and people don't behave ethically, or they just do stupid stuff, I bet you we get us some reform real quickly.
Yeah, especially since we have one right behind that one by 10 days.
Yeah. So here's the thing, guys. Realize you have to have some way to work against a system that has all of the power, because an insurance company has all the power. They write the policy, they interpret the policy, they determine what coverage is and isn't, they determine how much therefore will be paid. They control the majority of the process, and it's by design through the policy.
And they control what kind of time it is.
Yes, they do control the timing, because they control the purse strings of this, which means that there does have to be some way to offset for that fundamental, profound disequilibrium. All right. If they can pay what they want, decide they don't like it, decide they don't like a unit cost, take forever to make a decision, there has to be some way for an injured party to be able to reach out practically to be able to say, I think I need remedy. I think I need to square this away. And it can't be something where you have to hire your own attorney to do this, because people don't have money, especially after a loss like that, to hire an attorney for it. So make fee shift go both ways. If the insured wins, the carrier pays for it. If the insured loses, the insured pays the carrier's fees. Fine.
We already have that part. We have that part still.
Do we really?
We do.
Because I thought you paid your own.
Not everybody.
So what are the conditions for that, Mr. Dave? Mr. Herring?
If you lose, they can. If you lose as the insured, they can toll you with their fees. If they lose to you, you cannot toll them with your fees.
Correct.
And that will change. That will change,
yeah.
Because it is absolutely unfair. It doesn't matter who you are.
Correct.
That's unfair. If it just doesn't matter. If you and I get in an argument and we have a lawsuit together, if you beat my ass, you're going to get legal fees.
Right. Yep. And here's the thing. If you're trying to get rid of the abuse, then everybody being responsible. And I can't really say that there's a real equity between an insurance company being responsible for legal fees and an insured being responsible for legal fees, because it's going to have a very different impact on both of those parties. A really different impact, because it can wipe out an insured and a carrier will simply roll it into next year's premium base.
Well, I think you're right, and I just think that we used to have a saying in we used to have a story that everybody told in Louisiana that had happened in South Louisiana. They had a lake, and they had all these, people had their houses around the lake.
Mm-hmm.
and occasionally the dogs or cats would go missing, and they just let it ride.
Is
Okay.
that your FEMA tax? That's your gator
Okay.
tax.
Okay. And then somebody's kid went missing,
Right.
and they drained that lake and killed every one of those gators, because what the gators did was take it too far.
Right.
And when you take something too far, the recoil is always much harder.
Yeah. I think
And
we're going to
I think
have
that's going to be interesting.
I'm going to guess that next legislative session may have a very different run to it. Again, if you're just trying to keep it and make it fair, both parties having to be responsible for it makes a real difference. And here's the thing, and here's the reality of it. Unless an attorney for an insured can take something on contingency so that they know they can get paid on it, and then they become willing to take the risk of losing and having their fees not be recovered, which is what we had before under the fee shift and under the assignment. We had that. If they can do that, then an attorney can make a business model, because they can get funding to be able to do their work, because these attorneys aren't multinational firms. They don't have Wall Street or BlackRock money behind them doing it. They got to find some way to be able to do all this work up front on contingency and know they're going to get paid. Well, what that would do is that sobers up the entire market. An insurance company will, if they're pretty sure that they're gonna owe for the fees, and more importantly, the one that they really talk about is the contractors, their black hat or bad faith kind of behavior, taking nuisance claims and things like that because they were pretty sure that they could get paid on them. If a contractor knows that he's not going to be able to get paid if it doesn't work the way it's supposed to work,
Right.
and they don't prevail, cat tax, and the insured knows that if they don't win, they're going to have to pay the opposing side's fees, then that becomes very fair. And that means that you don't have everybody taking everything. No attorney is going to want to take a file they aren't sure is a winner. That's going to get rid of a bunch of these stupid things. No insurance company should want to pursue things where they know that there's going to be a payment, and then the insured is going to be like very, very sober about how much their claim is worth, knowing that they have an exposure in this too. So this sobers everybody up and promotes much more ethical behavior and responsible litigation, I think.
Yes. And if you would have told me in my younger days that I would ever be advocating for an attorney, I would have told you that you were crazy.
Well, how about this? Like, I would ever advocate for a PA. If you'd have told me that I would have ever advocated openly and outwardly for a PA, I would have said you were out of your mind, because fundamentally, at least in Florida, in lots of other places, them taking away, nice cat butt, them taking away, it made me lose my focus. Literally, them taking away, them making you take a percentage of the fee and not allowing it to be a percentage outside of the settlement. I struggle with anything that lessens what I feel like an insured should get. And I know and I understand, and I have no beef at all with PAs. I like PAs and work with PAs. But the reality is, the insured does get less than what the award was for. And assuming that the award was the right number in full, that means they got less than what they really needed. And I never liked the feeling that there was no way to really feel like they got made whole with me getting paid. And we all know how practically it works behind the curtain. And in reality, if the other option is they get 30% or 40% of what they should have gotten, getting 100% of what they should have gotten and having to give up a fee for it is a better outcome. But it still sucks as an outcome, because they shouldn't have had to do any of it in the first place, because it should have been paid properly up front regardless. So it always seems like the little guy is, kind of taking it. Well, I won't tell you where he's taking it, but he's taking it in an uncomfortable and private place.
Well, let's also, if we're going to say reforms, then we're going to say this: we have to let the adjusters adjust. It is the simplest way to take a qualified human who is licensed to do so, to do the job they were licensed to do.
Yep. And it creates a lot of this. But be aware right now, You will not be getting those adjusters in mass. Those are not the adjusters that are typically responding to storms, guys. You need to make sure your file, if you can't convince the adjuster that you have about all the things that we just went under, all the elements that were supposed to be in the file and the documentation and the this and that and the other, if you can't do that with them, you better make darn straight that the package that goes in has all of those things in it, and that the next person.
And what you're going to find, I think, is always interesting when you have wind and flood.
Yeah.
Is you're going to find on the wind side, originally right after the storm, you're going to get a cat adjuster.
Yep.
Who got temporary license, who was paid $10,000 show up because he had a driver's license in a car.
Bogomir.
Yes. And so, and then that person's going to show up as your cat adjuster. While on the flood side, they're going to have somebody that's flood certified. So they're usually going to have slightly better practices. But you've got these two adjusters that in some ways have to relate to each other, that it makes it real hard to do. So you end up having to, it's just a problem. I don't want to talk about it. It's horrible.
It is a hot mess.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's a hot mess.
Hot mess. Now I'm going to get this right. Darn it. It is a, I'm getting my finger in the right space. Hot mess. Yeah, there we go. I'm sorry. Everything gets reversed on the camera, and then I don't know what to do, and my brain's like.
You know, when we have hurricanes like this close together, they really jack up my schedule.
They do.
I mean, really jack up my schedule. Like I was supposed to be just north of Jacksonville the day this thing was arriving.
I'm still going to see you on Friday. Are we going to be shooting content and promo for our appraisal summit?
If you scheduled it, that's what we're doing.
That's Friday. You're going to be here, assuming there's still a here to here.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get all prettied up.
I'm going to have to go get my ears lifted up.
I'm going to get my ears lifted. I'll have to do that.
See, it looks better when I do this, but then I stop.
Oh, but can I do a micro thread like all the chicks do? Ah, there we go.
Hey, no. What you just need to do is you need to just put the camera up here.
The problem is that if you did it, I don't know how you give me an eye lift. There's just too much eye to lift. Yeah, I think this is it's going to require a more skilled surgeon than somebody trying to give me a brow lift. Look how experienced I am. See how responsible and trustworthy I earned all of these.
You know what I wanted to do? What I wanted to do is I wanted to find a guy who kind of looked like me, but a younger version of me, and we could just morph his picture into all of mine over like 5 years, and then I could just disappear, and they would have the new David Herring. It'd be like the Dread Pirate Robertson. They'd say later on, they'd be like, that guy looks kind of the same. He's looks the same for like 70 years. It's like he never
recognize him. Yeah.
Yeah, but we couldn't find anybody who thought that small of themselves.
That little. I don't know that I want to be your before picture.
All right. Well, listen.
All right.
Godspeed this week. I hope you don't need it.
I hope I don't too. I don't either. Someone will be. So pray for them. Be kind. Even people that you don't particularly care for.
Yes.
Probably
because
still need
we're
that.
getting the fog of a cat inside the fog of a cat.
Yeah. With the fog of a cat coming.
So we're gonna have like fog of the cat times 3.
Is that cat 3? It's a cat 3 event.
That is a cat 3 event.
You know.
Right.
Yeah, we don't like that.
I really do.
Cat 1.
I really do hope this doesn't come in at anything more than a 3 period, because at least on most 3s, people could stay home. And being displaced from home is a particularly hard thing.
I'm telling you,
a 3 right now, it is
a 3
hard.
A 3 in Tampa, in St. Pete, Clearwater, all the way up, guys. St. Pete's old. South Tampa is old. Really soft target. It couldn't be any softer. It was if it was your mama's bosom that you were laying your head against. Is that soft?
It's like white bread, man. I'm telling you,
it is.
Soft,
it's like a loaf of wonder. we yeah, there you go. Tampa is a white bread target. It's a wonder. You've heard of Wonder Goo? We have Wonder Construction.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that happy note, Be good. Be safe.
All
See
right.
you on Friday, if
Good,
not
dude.
before.
Talk,
Bye.
talk to you soon.